We are live. It is straight up 2 p.m. on the East Coast. It's 2 p.m. for me. I think it's, what is it, 1 p.m. for you, Andrea? So
sure thing.
Excellent. We've got a hot one today, folks. We're excited about our guest speaker today. Lots of folks tuning in from all over the world. I think we got New Zealand on the call today. So I think that's
nice.
What is that, 2 a.m.? Because that's 14 hours. So is it Rob Wellesley? Let me know what time it is where you're tuning in. So we got Rick tuning in from Northern Michigan. We got Ashley from South Carolina. Donald from the Windy City. And Clearcom IT from Massachusetts. Probably a little colder up there than it is for us. So excellent. Lots of folks, tell us where you're from if you're just tuning in, and whether or not this is the first time you've caught any of the live streams. But we want to welcome back and christen a new season of the Behind the Geeks series. I think this is the third iteration. We were trying to figure that out the other day, Andrea. This was Nigel's brainchild a couple years ago that he started in the tribe with Richard Tubb, Pete Matheson, and Scott Riley. So that was one iteration. Then Nigel turned the reins over to me to run Behind the Geeks, and then that became the Not an MSP show. Now we're Behind the Geeks again with the A-Team. I need to get us a cool ramp up jingle. I really do. I'm gonna work on that for our next one. So, Ginger said this is her first time watching a live stream. Matt said he's calling from the Colorado Rockies, also the first time. So welcome. So first of all, I did want to say, while you're here on the YouTube channel, be sure to like and subscribe. We're trying to get Nigel's YouTube channel up as many subscribers as we can. We've got Tom turning in from Yellowknife for the Canadian content. So we'll see if we can put some Canadian content in here for Tom. So I like his tomfoolery. I like his YouTube handle. So today, if you're not familiar, if this is the first time catching the live stream, my partner in crime is Andrea Wells, the head of member success for the Tech Tribe. And you probably have seen my ugly mug around the Tech Tribe for a while now. I've done a few trainings inside of the Tech Tribe, but both of us have been around the MSP industry for years. But if you're watching this live, you want to maybe watch it later. As soon as the live stream is done today, you can go back and rewatch that. So hopefully I think we just did see, Steve just asked that question, is it downloadable or watchable later? Yep, same link that you used to tune in live, Steve. You can go back and watch as soon as the sound is off. So I'm from Tampa. So again, rolling in, we got Greece in the house. So I love seeing where people are from.
A little bit of everything.
It's awesome. Tom Fox has been around for a while as well. He likes the radio DJ voice, the sweet sounds of Orange Nomad. So Jay Spence from West Virginia, fellow Mountaineer. Go Mountaineers. Glad to have you in the house. So without further ado, let's bust into what we are here for today. And we're talking about one of those subjects that is, I don't know, would you say it's uncomfortable for MSPs to talk sales, Andrea? What do you think?
I think definitely out of the gate for sure.
Yeah. So it's one of those topics, sales and marketing we're tech folks. We get kind of weirded out when we got to do things that we're not quite accustomed to. But I want to read the bio of who we're bringing on today. Some of you may know who Jennifer Bleam is. Jennifer is an award-winning speaker, respected leader in the IT channel, a 2-time best-selling author. Didn't know that about her, but her book, Simplified Cybersecurity Sales for MSPs, available on Amazon and Audible, has nearly 100 reviews, and I've seen it. MSPs can't stop raving about her book. Awesome book. I've read it myself. She's had the privilege of speaking at countless industry events, including ones hosted by ConnectWise, Continuum, Kaseya, Auvik, Technology Marketing Toolkit. That's where we actually met Jennifer. Chartech, ASCII, and Channel Pro. She's a student of sales and marketing, both inside and outside the channel. She uses that knowledge to help MSPs unlock their unique sales genius. I love that one. So she's going to help us unlock our unique sales genius today. But not only did Jennifer run her own MSP, and that's how I met Jennifer as a fellow peer in a peer group. She's also had the privilege of coaching over 2,000 MSPs on marketing and sales. She's grown several divisions and companies to multi-million dollars, including a cybersecurity firm in the IT channel. Jennifer has trained with Sandler Training and True Methods and Chartek's Sales Lab. So without further ado, let's welcome Jennifer Bleam to the show. See, I didn't tell you I was going to do that one, did I?
Oh, the queen. Like, I don't know. That's awesome. I love it. Thank you so much. Super excited to be here.
Yes, glad to have you with us today. You're going to be dropping some bombs of knowledge on us today. And I can't wait because I always learn things from you. Learned a lot as a peer in our peer group as well. So let's get, if you have questions, by the way, if you put in the letter Q : in the comments, that way I can flag those. So if you have questions for Jennifer or for Andrea or myself, we'd be happy to answer those for you as well. So without further ado, let's get into dropping some bombs. Let me flip over to my questions. And I think she's got the first one.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started here. Make use
All
of
right.
everyone's time.
So, Jennifer, I know a part of your sales training philosophy is an emphasis on having a true sales process. So, as we kick off today, can you start by explaining what your definition of a sales process really is and why having one is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's as simple as step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Like that's the very basic of any process. But specifically with a sales process, it's the epitome of beginning with the end in mind. And so there are a few specific things we want to avoid at the end of our sales process or even in the middle of a sales conversation. So those may be things like, well, that was all really great information, Andrea, but I'm not the decision maker. Like, okay, how do we avoid that? Or that's all great, but I need to think about it. Or, wow, that's a lot of information, but that's a lot way outside of our budget. I really can't afford that. And so really your sales process is beginning and saying, what are the most horrible outcomes that could come after I spend 5, 6, 8 man hours with this prospect? And then how do we reverse engineer that to not allow those things to happen? It's never going to be 100%, but to keep those things from happening. And then also that's very you focused, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But then layering over top of that, what is going to make the buyer comfortable? So they need the know, like, and trust. They need some rapport. They may have questions. You don't want to monologue over them. And so not only are you creating almost like a conveyor belt where you can get from beginning to end as quickly and easily as possible for you, but then you want to overlay over top of that the interpersonal skills needed to make the prospect feel comfortable so they'll open up and be honest with you. And so that is what the process is how do we go from, hey, I might be interested in what you have, to getting hopefully a yes, but a no is also okay. And how do we create that in a systematic, repeatable manner so that everybody on the team knows what those moving parts are?
Okay. That makes total sense. So now that we kind of understand how you would explain that, what would be a good place then for most MSPs to get started in building that process?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways. I'm very graphical, so I like a whiteboard, or I'm starting to play with the tool Miro. If you've never played with a Miro board, Miro is a cool place to start. But sometimes it's as simple as just Post-it notes. Like, what are you doing right now that feels natural, that feels good, and that you want to make sure, whether you continue to sell or you're training someone else to sell, you want them to do those things. So perhaps that is, you naturally do a little bit of research before you walk in the room, or maybe you walk in the room and you look around and you notice sports teams or logos from a college that you have in common. You actually heard Andrew doing some of this as well. Someone was from West Virginia, so he clued into that and talked about sports teams. And so on those Post-it notes would be things you want to repeat And then you may also put on those post-it notes things we don't want to have happen ever again. And so that becomes part of your do not do this inside of the sales process. So when you step back and what you're really doing is you're troubleshooting. You do it naturally. If you're a technician, you do that troubleshooting thing really well. You go back and you have kind of after action report after you migrated someone to the cloud, or maybe you migrated someone from this cloud solution to 365, whatever. You do that after action report anyway, and you kind of document, okay, what went horribly wrong? We can't ever have that happen again. How do we reverse engineer to keep that from happening? That is the part of your brain that you want to tap into to create your sales process.
So let's talk about a couple things that you pointed out that I know were a problem for me for the longest time. You touched on one of them, which is not having everybody in the room. I hated that one. I hated that one when you get all the way done, you do your whole dog and pony show, only for them to tell you, oh, I got to check with somebody else. Where do we introduce or try to overcome that in the sales process?
Yeah, so let me answer your question, but before we get there, I want to warn you that it's no matter what you put in place, it's never going to be 100% valid and 100% successful. And I think that's part of why so many technical folks have issues with marketing and sales, is because it is equal parts art as it is science. Like with a computer, you click bold, and it always, or 99% of the time, will bold that word. Like, it's very binary. It's either working or it's not. So I'm going to answer your question, but just understand that there will be times that this doesn't always work. And that's what makes sales and marketing challenging, because you're dealing with humans who don't always play by your rules and follow your scripts. And so with that slight caveat, I like to confirm that early in the process. I would consider that a pre-qualification call. And I know inside of the tech tribe, there's actually a light training, I think a checklist of sorts around a pre-qualification call. I haven't looked at it recently, but I suspect that this is probably on there. Finding out, okay, that's wonderful. I'd be happy to talk to you. Confirming geography, maybe confirming budget, but definitely confirming decision-making status. And an easy way to say that is, we're going to talk about a lot in this call. There's probably going to be some questions that surprise you. We may go in directions that you've never considered before. And we're going to uncover probably some gaps and some things that might make you a little bit uneasy, that you want to bridge those gaps right away. All I need to make sure is that the various people that are the movers and shakers in your company are in the room. So is that the leadership team, or is there maybe a CFO that we need to bring in? Like, who needs to hear these things? Whose life do we need to add value to? Because I really need them to be in the room.
Yeah, great point. So what would you say? I used to deal with attorneys, and that was one that I always got was, you had the gatekeeper or whoever was responsible for getting that process started. How would you recommend, maybe bridging that gap to get all of those players in the room, even if it's just for a couple minutes?
Yep. I love what you said at the very end, because that's exactly what I would do, is say, listen, we're going to cover a whole lot. I know your attorney is very busy. Maybe he or she's at court, tracking every billable hour, dealing with phone calls and intake forms, all of the things. So I want to be respectful of his time. I would imagine that your process probably involves you, the paralegal or whoever you're talking to. Your job is to gather some of the information, provide as much insight as you can. Totally fine. I'm totally willing to expect that. Now, let's pause out a role play for a second. What you're doing is there's a little bit of surprise there, because all the other MSPs probably immediately went for the, nope, I'm not allowed to talk to you unless the decision maker is in the room. So you've just disarmed that influencer, because she or he is probably the influencer. And now you've positioned yourself as just a little bit different. So yep, I'll play by your rules, no worries. But I do need to ask, like, for the last 10, maybe 12 minutes tops, can we pull the attorney in? I'll give a quick recap, let him or her know what the next steps are, and make sure we're all on the same page. So you're allowing the prospect to control the process, but you're really controlling the process, because you're saying, and if they're not willing to agree to that, And I don't think I would go on that sales call unless you're still in practice mode because you don't have enough leads coming in the door and you need every at bat you possibly can get to get your skills up to par.
Yeah, I think that right there, the last part of that, I think was key because, we all want to hit a home run every time we go to bat, but we need reps. And
Yeah.
I'll be honest, like none of us are that good that we can do one rep every 6 months and knock it out of the park.
Mhm.
And I resisted that for the longest time. I resisted that. And then when we joined the peer group together, that's what I started to learn. I need to get the reps. I need to get the practice in. I need to hone the system. And
I
that,
like I like the reps. Like I like when you're walking in and you're like, I've really got a 1% chance of closing this deal because that's what allows you to try on kind of the different avatars. Like maybe this is the sales call where I'm going to be like Jennifer and I'm going to be a little cheeky, or maybe this is the time where I'm going to be a little more laid back and I'm going to contemplate things and I'm going to I'm going to be like Andrew a little bit. And so you have to try those things on, and it does feel uncomfortable the first time that you try these different frames or you try these different avatars, or if you use scripts. I don't love scripts, but if you have different scripts or different word chunks that you're putting into different places, or maybe this is the one where you're going to try on, how do I get out of I need to think about it, and this is the one where you're going to play the heavy and you're going to be like, no, we don't do that. We don't let our prospects think about it. Oh, that's like really stressful and maybe you feel a little pushy. Well, what better time to try that on than a sales call that you have a 1% chance of closing? So I encourage you to go out on some calls that you don't expect to close. Like you might surprise yourself, first of all, but then secondly, just use it as a time to practice.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I liked how you talked about refining that process because you're always going to find, I always try to get 1% better in a process. Like I don't want to revamp the thing from scratch every time I go out. But having that documented process, let's talk about that. How important
Yes.
is it to have a documented, repeatable process?
It's 100% important, and it's interesting because if you forward look, if you kind of future pace, many MSP business owners want to eventually get to the point where they're not doing sales and marketing. And so, and just very transparently, I am at the point in my business where we're starting to transition to having sales professionals. I don't know that I'll ever give it up 100%, but that may look like one or two sales calls a month as opposed to 20 sales calls a month. And so what I'm doing is I'm forcing myself. So as the owner, I flex my sales process just a little bit, but I'm forcing myself to follow my sales process because I know that as I'm bringing in another person, I need to be able to say, here is where I broke the ice and I created a little bit of a relationship with them. Here's where I was very gentle in pushing back. I did this earlier today where I asked somebody on the call what he had a massive marketing problem, but felt like his sales process was great. And I said, well, if I brought you 10 leads, how many do you think you could close? And he's like, all of them. I said, so let's talk about that a little bit. And so, one of our pieces of our sales process is that we are willing to ask difficult questions to help people, not for the sake of being stubborn or pigheaded, but to help someone and to add value to their world. And so, I make sure I'm following my process so that when I'm training my new salesperson who's coming in at the end of February, I can say, there, how we talked about asking difficult questions or challenging someone to think about something a little bit differently, which happens all the time in an MSP sale, forcing them to think about cybersecurity in a different way, forcing them to think about their managed services plus managed security budget in a different way. So if you have a process that requires that, then hopefully you have some examples in real life where you've exemplified that. So you can then ultimately train someone to take your place.
Absolutely. And that kind of touches on a viewer question that we got from Paul. Said he's from the UK. Welcome, Paul. Glad to have you. Should a salesperson be highly technically trained? So I
So
think it kind of dovetails. You got to have a process first. If you're going to hire a salesperson and you have no process, like you're dooming them to failure. I did it.
yes,
Spend
yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars. So
So I'm going to give the answer everybody loves, which is it depends. And it depends on your target market. Because if you are prospecting to and then going to be selling to a very technical buyer, so let's say a 400 person accounting firm, and who you're pitching to is the IT director, and that's that's your norm. Not that that's your whale client, but that is the avatar that you're chasing. That's your niche or your vertical. In that case, probably your salesperson does need to have some level of technical chops, so that if the IT director says, well, do you guys handle EDR including SOC or not? Well, the salesperson needs to be able to understand that. And that is a reasonable question, that an IT director would have that level of vocabulary and understand that level of technology and cybersecurity. But conversely, I'd be stunned if the typical 12-person law firm, whether it's decision maker or influencer, they're probably not going to say, do you have EDR with SOC, and is your SOC US based or Canada based or Australia based or not? They're not going to ask those questions. So it goes back to who you're targeting. And if you're targeting the average small business owner, it's actually more difficult to make a sale if you're technical, because what happens is you have a message mismatch. You may be very tempted to speak technically, and your prospect doesn't understand tech, and then they do this. They go bobbleheaded on you, and they just nod and they smile and they write something down, and then you're going to get to the end of your sales call and they're going to say the worst phrase in the world. That all sounds great. I just need to think about it. And that's like my least favorite sales objection of all time, because it usually means I lost them probably 30 minutes ago and didn't pick up on it. And now probably I've lost the sale, or it's very hard to get back on track. So technical if your buyer is technical, but only technical enough if your buyer is not technical.
Well, I would ask as a follow-on sort of to that is like, what would be different in your process? Or, I guess if you're selling cybersecurity, would you shift anything in particular? Maybe not technically, but is there anything different that you would focus on if you are selling maybe cyber?
Yeah, the only thing I would probably shift is that with traditional managed services, I tend to like as short of a sales process as possible. So possibly a one meeting or a one call close. Maybe stretch it to 2 if you absolutely have to. But with security, I really like you to do a security audit. In fact, Eric emailed me yesterday. He just finished going through the training that I have inside of the Tech Tribe, specifically around selling cybersecurity. And he's saying, okay, great. If I'm going to use a security assessment, he had a couple of questions, but just to dovetail on what you were saying, Andrea, that's probably its own sales call or its own appointment. So you're going to have your normal discovery sales call. The goal of that call is to schedule your security assessment, and then that's a separate sales call or possibly a technical call. And then you have a final call where you're going over your result of findings, and here's what we found. And that's where you can leverage my risk-based selling matrix to explain to them their risks and the impact on their business if they don't minimize or mitigate those risks.
That makes sense. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think that was my temptation for the longest time, is like we love and we geek out on the tech, so we go in there and we just start puking tech on them.
Yes.
And I know, like you said, when you get this and you see their eyes glazing over, I know I've lost. Like that's it. My wife's the same way, so I know I've lost.
Not good. Not good.
It's like, I don't care what you're saying now. I hear you talking, but I'm not hearing what you're saying. So
Yes. 100%.
yeah, so resisting that urge is really hard. And it does. And I think it goes back to that practice where the more you practice not introducing the tech. And for me, it's like when we started focusing on specific vertical markets like attorneys and property management companies, like they don't care. Like most businesses do not care about the tech. They just want it to work. Like for an attorney I just want it to work so I can get billable hours. Like I don't care how we do that. And I think 98% of customers are that way. What do you?
Yes,
What do you?
which means that conversely, if what the attorney cares about is billable hours, if you can talk about the risks to that happening, should they have a ransomware attack or a breach or some other kind of a security incident, what you're doing is you're talking about the impact on their business. You're talking about the benefit to their business. And when you're talking tech, you're usually talking features. And so I was coaching a client a week or two ago, and their presentation or their pitch was very much about artificial intelligence and why we don't use AI, but we do use artificial intelligence. And I mean, like, transparently, my eyes were glazing over a little bit listening to the pitch. And I'm in the industry, so I pretty much understood what he was saying. And I'm like, no, you've got to do benefits over features. And my hack, if we can use the word hack when we're talking about cybersecurity, my hack to make sure that you're talking about benefits is insert the words so that, so we use artificial intelligence so that, and then fill in the blank. And then if you can go a level deeper, the impact of the impact or the impact of the benefit, we use artificial intelligence so that this happens, so that your company can continue to create its widgets. Or, we use artificial intelligence so that you can track billable hours, so that you never have to worry about tracking hours manually on a legal pad and then going back in time and having to manually enter those and 20% error. And then now you're just losing money. And so that's so that forces you to get away from features and move into benefits, which is what we all buy. We all buy benefits when we're in the buying seat.
Yeah. And those reps, also, you find those things out.
Yes.
Like, you find things out about what is the true motivation. And for I said, for attorneys, once you find out that everything revolves around billable hours and least amount of people to do that as possible.
Yes.
That's the language they speak.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that ahead of time, then you can kind of plan out your objection handling. And I know you have a specific way of handling objections, but we all like to believe that we're never going to have any objections. The customer's just going to roll over, sign a check, and we've got a managed service customer. But that's not how it goes. So
it doesn't go that way. Again, prospects just don't follow our playbook. I don't understand. I guess I do. In fairness, I do understand, because when I'm the buyer, I'm probably giving objections as well. But the biggest point I would make about objections, I want to reframe them, because I think all of us have a bit of a physical reaction, maybe an emotional reaction, when we hear an objection, where we kind of tense up. Some people have told me they get a sick feeling in the pit of their stomach because they feel like they've lost the sale. An objection equals a stop sign, equals I had to drag them on my pipeline from maybe to closed, lost, which is like it's a horrible feeling. I want to reframe that for you, because an objection, and Brian Tracy said this, I love this when I read this in his book a few years back, an objection is simply a request for more information. So if I'm in a sales conversation with Andrea, and Andrea says, I don't know, whatever, growing, thriving businesses should be investing, I'm making up this stat, please don't quote me, should be investing 5% of their gross revenue into cybersecurity and managed services. And I am the prospect, and I'm like, 5%? Man, that sounds really high. Now, what if I don't say that and I do the bobblehead prospect thing? What is Andrea going to hear at the end of the sales call? She's going to hear, sounds great, I need to think about it. Or she's going to hear, wow, that all sounded wonderful. I loved your EDR with SIM SOC SOAR as a service, but it's outside of our budget. So wouldn't you rather hear that in the moment, where Jennifer, the prospect, says to Andrea, the salesperson, 5%? Well, man, I'm a $20 million company. Let me grab my calculator and do that math. And I don't know, that sounds really high. Is that really what people are paying anymore for this type of solution? So what I've just done is I have shown that I believe Andrea might be right. Like, I'm willing to ask a question and say, I might be wrong. You said one thing, I think it's the opposite, or I think something different, but I respect you enough as a thought leader and as an influencer, and you did a great job, creating rapport with me. And so I'm going to challenge you But really what I'm doing is saying, could you please help me see it your way? Because that is not what I thought walking into this sales call. So it literally is a request for more information. So don't look at objections as stop signs. Objections, it's almost like start with no. Like I love it when I'm in a sales conversation and someone gives me the no, because I'm like, now we're starting. Like now we're having a conversation because you said, no, that's too much money, or 5%. Really, that sounds like that's really high. And then now I can say, well, why is that? Well, what are you spending now? Well, are you aware that Forbes says this? And do you really find that surprising? Maybe you're looking at it as an annual number. Let's have a conversation around what that is monthly. But you can't have any of those conversations if they keep it all in themselves and never ask you. So an objection is really, it's a gift. It's literally and truly a gift, where if someone says, I don't know, Andrew, I don't think I can work with that. You said your average response time is 2 hours and I need it to be 2 minutes. Well, if you can't deliver what they want, okay, is that a deal breaker? Yep, it's a deal breaker. We need 2 minutes. Okay, I don't have what you need. Let me make a recommendation. You call somebody else. Here's a referral. And now you just potentially saved yourself an hour. So yeah. I actually welcome objections.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, one of them, we always think everything is around the price objection, but is it really? Do you find that is it really about price as an objection most times?
It can be. And so there's a rule in sales: seek to understand, because wow, that's a lot of money, or wow, we can't afford that, could mean we don't have the money. We literally, you just told me it was $2,500 a month. We do not have $2,500 a month. Even if I took from my own salary, I'm not willing to do that. There just is not enough money in the bank, in the cash flow, to be able to afford that. So sometimes it can be about money. Sometimes it can be, I can't make that decision of that dollar figure of that magnitude without involving my executive team, my board of directors, my biggest donors if I'm a not-for-profit. So it could mean that. And it could mean, and this is so hard to hear, but it could mean that you did a really poor job at building the value. Because if I don't see the value in what you're providing, you're now essentially trying to sell me a widget or a product or a service for $2,500 a month, and I don't know why I need it. So any good business owner is going to say, yeah, I'm not going to pay that. That's too much money for the value that you're providing, which might mean you did a really bad job proving value. You talked about features. You didn't talk about benefits. You monologued, you didn't pull them back in. You didn't pick up on the fact that they became bobblehead prospects, which I think we've now coined that term inside of this for the first time. Someone's going to mail me a bobblehead. I can feel it. But that is sometimes an indication that they don't have the money, or that money is the true objection. But a lot of times it just means that you didn't do your job as a salesperson.
Yeah. So, Andrea, can you think of any other objections that people would have besides like money, and, have you seen in the tribe?
I think like some it's, not right now. we need to think about it. I know you've mentioned that earlier, that we need to think about it, which, always leads you to think, then why are we having this meeting anyway? You kind of start to wonder, why did you call me to begin with? But it kind of makes you think.
So can I piggyback on that? So
yeah, absolutely.
I teach this concept called the elephant in the room. And anytime you hear yourself saying, yeah, I just wonder why we're having this conversation, or the worst is, man, I wish I would have, which I think we all do, when we walk out of a sales call, I wish I would have. And I call that the elephant in the room. So anytime you're kind of thinking, there's really two people inside of you when you're doing a sales call. There's the one that's actually doing the sales call, but then there's kind of that voice in the back of your head. And anytime that voice is like, well, man, you just said I need to think about it, but I wonder why we're here. Like, we just talked for 90 minutes and he was talking about how busy he was and how many priorities he's running, and his employees are constantly calling at him, asking him to do stuff. And now he's saying, I need to think about it. Address the elephant in the room. And a really easy way to do this is just to say, Hey, Andrea, do you mind if I address the elephant in the room real quickly? And that's a question, and you wait for an answer. And yes, it's a closed-ended question, but just break that rule. It's okay. You can ask closed-ended questions in sales in the right position. So is it okay if we address the elephant in the room? Sure. Go ahead. What's the elephant in the room? Well, you were mentioning earlier how busy you are and how you've got competing priorities and you're trying to acquire a company and you're making sure about moving to the cloud, but you want to make sure you're doing it securely. You have all these questions about Google versus Office 365. And like I could hear the anxiety in your voice. Did I pick up on that correctly? Like, is that's a stress point, right? Well, yeah. Okay, but you just said to me I need to think about it. I would like to ask, isn't that whole process, number one, going to add to your stress? But number two, I don't know when you're going to find the time to think about it. So can I suggest that we just talk it through together right now and let's just work as a team? And I'm not saying that I'm the right choice, but can I help you think that through? And so you've literally just addressed the elephant in the room and you've said, can I help you? And then you can, Benjamin Franklin close, which is, well, let's talk about A versus B. I just had that, like I use these things with my children as well. My son is trying to figure out, should I stay on campus and do my master's degree or should I come home and do my master's degree? And I just walked him through the Benjamin Franklin close, just the A, B. I'm like, draw a line down the center and here's the pros and cons of one and here's the pros and cons of the other. And I don't know which one makes sense to you. And so address the elephant in the room. With MSPs, sometimes it's that you're talking to a decision maker, you're talking to an influencer, but they're getting pulled away. Their phone is ringing, the FedEx guy is walking in, they're going, hold on, I'll be right back with you. And they like leave the room and then they come back and you're like, what in the world? Like we had some momentum and we had some emotion and now it's all gone. Like it got sucked out of the room. Elephant in the room. Hey, Mike, I'm like, just feel like you're getting pulled in a lot of different directions. I want to respect that. I know that you're busy. I know your number one job is to run your business. I feel like we might get a little bit more out of this if we reschedule for next week. Yeah. Now, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to either reschedule for next week and hopefully show up and respect your time, or they're going to go, no. Hold on a second. Let me close my door. Let me put my Slack on Do Not Disturb and put my phone face down. I am all yours for the next 30 minutes. But you have to call them politely on the carpet and address that elephant in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. Donald said a confused mind says no. Yeah,
100%.
Absolutely. There are a couple questions around that. I know like that was in the objection handling, like embracing that in the sales process is hard. But a few of these are around, specific objections. So let's take Bethany's first so we don't miss that. Bethany said, in most businesses, the marketing person isn't the person going out and meeting those company heads. So what do you consider to be the most important focus for the marketing person on the sales side?
Yes.
That's an interesting question.
That is a great question. So I have a process that I call the debrief, where after the salesperson walks out of the sales call, they do a debrief. And usually it's around what were objections I heard that I wasn't prepared to diffuse? What was something that surprised me? What's one thing that I did really, really well that I want to kind of capsulate and maybe even write down, try to remember the words that I said? But in your position where you have a marketing team, I would add to that debrief process, what were their challenges? What did they want us to solve? So for example, if you start to hear, let's say that you go on 5 sales calls a month and your sales team is starting to feed that data back to you and you're starting to hear, I'm going to make this up, but it does happen. You're starting to hear that all of the clients of ABC MSP are starting to feel like they're growing pretty big and pretty fast. Maybe they're going too big for their britches, and all of their clients that you've spoken to are starting to feel underserved. And they're using that word. They are all using the word underserved. That's valuable information, because you can potentially change a headline on your website. You could do a blog post, 5 signs that you are being underserved. You could do a piece of video content, 3 ways to tell if you're being underserved or if you're just being too picky. Now, hear what I did there, because the prospect is thinking, am I really being underserved, or have I just set my standards are just too high? So if you're like, how to know if your standards are too high. Transparently, I have a blog on my site that says how to know if you're being ripped off by your marketing agency. Because guess what? I have prospects who come to me and say, I feel like I got ripped off by my marketing agency. Well, I don't have to hear that more than 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times, depending how thick-headed I'm being, before I'm like, MSPs have a challenge. They're being ripped off by a marketing agency. So I wrote a blog post about it, and I drive traffic to that blog probably 3 times a month in one-on-one conversations when people are like, I just don't know. Maybe I should fire them. Maybe I shouldn't. I'm like, well, go read this blog. It might be helpful. Now, when I follow up with them, I can reference that piece of content, ask if it was helpful, ask if it makes sense for us to have another sales conversation. So that's what I would do if I had a sales team and a marketing team that were that are disparate. They're different swim lanes. You've got to find a way to pull those together.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it, capturing their exact words.
Yes, so powerful.
Using their language. So if I'm a marketing person, so Andrea can definitely testify to that. Like using their language is how you build the marketing side of it.
Yes.
Let's see here. PRG asks, let's put his up on the screen. What if they're sold on value, but the objection is, I don't want a recurring bill?
Yeah, in that case, I probably would, there's just different tactics and different techniques. I would probably just use an open-ended question here and say, tell me why that is. Like, okay, you love what I'm presenting, and technically what I am presenting comes with a recurring bill. That's the only way to deliver this type of service. So you're saying you don't want a recurring bill. Help me understand why that is. And listen, like literally ask that question and then listen, because it's probably something like, I was burnt before. I got into a 1-year or 3-year contract and I wasn't able to get out. And then it's like, okay, would it help you to read a couple of happy client testimonials or some case studies? Would it help you to know that while we have a 3-year contract, we do have a 60-day easy out? Like I'm making these things up. Please, use them if they're appropriate. Don't. I never advocate lying on a sales call. Hopefully, you know that. But an open-ended question, and then you're simply trying to diffuse that, and maybe it is understanding where they are coming from and commiserating with them. I understand. That's so frustrating. That's happened to me too. I hate that about our industry. Or it could be, I understand where you're coming from. Would it help you to understand why we have a recurring model? Some people will latch onto that, especially if they're systems people, operations people. They want to understand, well, why do you have a recurring model? Well, we have found that there's a whole lot of cleanup that needs to be done. We are usually not even profitable. And don't be afraid to talk about that. Like, they know you're a business owner, so they understand that your goal is to turn a profit. But if they understand that you're not even profitable until day 90, which is not unusual, sometimes 6 months, that's a little bit long. Talked to an MSP a couple months ago. He wasn't profitable for a year, which is that's a really long time. But what you're doing is you're simply saying you've requested more information, right? Because an objection is a request for more information. Let me share with you why that's our model, why we believe that serves not just us, but it serves you as well. And so it could be, you could have conversations around how difficult it is to switch from one IT company to the next. Most people that we're talking to are looking for a long-term relationship. And don't be afraid to say, and if you're looking for a short-term relationship, we may not be a fit. And that's okay. Because we're not for everyone. We're, I don't know, like a German chocolate cake. Everybody doesn't like German chocolate cake. If we're not a fit for you, that's okay. Just tell me that. And sometimes giving them permission will either allow them to say, yeah, you're right, I just don't think this is a fit. Or they may be like, no, I'm not saying that. I like everything about it except the recurring business model. Okay, great. So now we've isolated that objection and we can say, well, that's, I've shared with you why we do business that way. Is that a deal breaker?
Yeah.
And if it's a deal breaker, then you didn't have a deal anyway. If they're like, well, I don't love it, but okay, I'm in.
Yeah. And I think, to answer his question as well, like that's not something you want to hear after you've presented like I want to know those things way before that. I
Agree.
introduce that cost conversation before you get to the proposal.
Yes.
Yeah, so perfect. So PRG said thank you for the full-bodied reply.
You are
So
very welcome.
we covered that one.
That's a very polite way of saying lots of words, Jennifer, lots of words.
So let's talk about, I know like when I sold my MSP 10 years ago this year, cybersecurity was important, but not nearly as important as it is now. I know Andrea has a couple questions she wanted to ask you around, how to reposition, how to properly sell cybersecurity specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but like, when you're going specifically for the cybersecurity sell, you talked about doing the assessment, but I guess, what other specific things would you suggest, they focus on? And then also too, what mistakes do you see MSPs making when they're presenting cybersecurity specifically?
Yeah, so I have quite a few clients that are leading with cybersecurity. And so they're using cyber as a way to be a differentiator. Now that is going to have a relatively short tail because I think in the next year, there hopefully more and more MSPs are going to understand that cybersecurity is not optional. But even if 90% of MSPs are bundling cybersecurity with managed services, if they're not selling it that way, you can continue to use it as a differentiator by leading with cybersecurity in your sales process. And an easy way to do that is to simply say, listen, of course we're going to make sure your printers work, and we're going to, make sure your computers are up to date, and that you're not using older machines, and maybe you've got multiple monitors and things like that. Like, that's kind of table stakes at this point. Everybody should be doing that. But what makes us different is we have a process around cybersecurity. Are you okay if I talk about that for 3 or 4 minutes and make sure that we're aligned? Because some people don't care about it. Some people aren't willing to pay it. Some people want it. Some people, whatever. So you can start to diffuse some of your objections early on. So I love leading with cybersecurity, whether it's mainly to prospects. To existing clients is a little bit different. And then your second question was around mistakes that I see people making. We touched on this earlier. Let me talk about 2 mistakes. One is getting too technical, which I think we parked there, but if there's additional questions around that, drop them in the chat. But the second challenge that I'm seeing, and it presents itself as a challenge. The challenge is a bloated pipeline. In other words, there's this stage at the end where it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's all these people that are thinking about the sale. And they've all said, we're really close to making a decision. And we're going to decide in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, whatever the timetable is. And that stage of your pipeline just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And mentally, you're like spending that onboarding fee, and you're like, I'm going to go get the new car. I'm going to buy my wife the kitchen, or like whatever it is, the chair for my office. I'm going to replace my aging chair, whatever it is. And that's a problem. A bloated last stage of your pipeline is a problem. It shows that you lost control of the sale earlier in the process. And so that is a problem I see a lot. That's probably the number one sales challenge, other than objections. That's probably the number one sales challenge that I deal with is we've got all of these deals at the end of our pipeline. How do we jar them loose? And it's some of the least favorite words I have to say, but those words are, you might not be able to. Those might really be closed lost. And they're just hanging out there in your pipeline, giving you an inflated sense of how much MRR you might be able to close this month, this quarter, this year. And so you have to engineer your sales process. Just kind of feel like we just went full circle. You have to engineer your sales process so that you don't get that, I need to think about it. And so maybe that is this a this quarter decision or a next quarter decision? Like, here's how our process works. It's going to take us about 5 weeks to go start to finish. But at the end of 5 weeks, I'm going to ask you to make a decision. And that answer can't be, I need to think about it, because that usually means no. Can you just tell me no? Like, we're all grown-ups here. And so you have to manage that end of pipeline. Very important if you've got a sales team. but it's also important if you're running sales yourself as the owner or a manager. Because otherwise you look at that and you're like, we've got $75,000 in monthly recurring revenue and I feel like I'm going to close them all and that's going to revolutionize my business. The reality is you might close one, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the most dangerous word in sales for me is maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I would, yes or no, we know what to do with that. But
right.
the maybes,
Yes.
it just dangles out there forever.
And then you're like, I feel like a pain. I don't want to follow up. How much follow up is too much follow up? I've already sent 3 emails and called 3 times. Is that too much? I feel like a nag. Let's get rid of all those feelings and just get a decision. It's a yes or a no.
Exactly. So around that, specifically around cyber, how do you sell into a client as an MSSP when they already have an existing MSP in place? How would you handle that sales call?
Okay, keep that on the screen for a second.
Yeah,
How do you sell into a client?
Here, I'll put it back up there. There we go.
Client as an MSSP. So tell me if you're interpreting this the same way. There's an MSP that's providing managed services. You've come in as an MSSP and you're providing the security piece.
Yeah. How would you sell that to a client?
What are you trying to sell them?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're trying to
They already have managed services, but you want to provide the security, just the cyber element.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. I wasn't clear. All right, so the greatest time to do this is during a quarterly business review or periodic business review, and it is a conversation around things have changed. Like part of the reason that you're paying me is to be your eyes and ears and to constantly be telling you if there are trends or threats or, we're constantly doing a SWOT analysis for you as our client. And one of the things we need to bring to your attention is that there is an increased risk of cyber attacks. And right now, what we're doing in your network is, I'm going to make this up, like map it to the NIST framework. Like we've got a lot of great protections in place for preventing the threat, but we don't have a great way to recover. Or flip that. Right now, we have a great way to recover data. We've installed, a BDR, a BCDR, and so we're great with that piece of the framework. But the government, I love throwing the government under the bus because it's not you. Like you're just trying to be the good guy. Let's make the government the bad guy. The government says that you want to have these 5 stages covered. And right now, because we've really been running on the things that we put in place 5 years ago, you are a little bit behind the times. And I just need to let you know that's a risk. And the impact on your business could be this and this and this. And that makes me nervous. Like it's keeping me up at night. I didn't get much sleep last night because I knew we were having this conversation today. So let's start with this. Would you agree that this and this and this are not okay? That those are risks that we need to mitigate? And I would just start there. That's where I would start with the conversation. And it's a conversation. It's a dialogue.
Exactly. And I think if you make it about that, you're not coming in to fight with the current MSP. Like we're here to assist. I think that's it's a little bit, again, a different conversation because not every MSP is qualified to be an MSP.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just think about the team I had 10 years ago. Like to deal with the cyber risks now, I was not qualified to make that leap to be a true MSSP. So, yeah, I definitely would have gotten help on that. Going to circle back on a question. Daniel Charnock asked me if I could pop this back in there. Any chance you could float the my stakeholder question back to Jennifer? So basically, as far as getting all the stakeholders in the room, I'd love to hear what questions she would require from the owner that would get them in the room. Like how would we get those stakeholders in the room?
Yeah, so let me answer this 2 ways because you have to make the sale or justify that request to the influencer. And so I would just say, we're probably gonna uncover some things that are gonna surprise you. I almost always uncover some pretty major security gaps. We might uncover some shared passwords. We might uncover some kind of surprise server in the server room that nobody knew existed and hasn't been protected for years. And so I want to be able to explain this to the stakeholder, the CEO. Let's just say the CEO.
Yep.
I want to be able to explain this to the CEO. And it's not that you can't explain it, but I don't know about your CEO, but a lot of CEOs, their brain comes at things, they attack problems from a different angle. And I want to make sure that we're able to answer every one of his questions that he has. And so we're going to uncover some things. They're going to be a little bit surprising. And there's probably some risks that the CEO is going to want to know. But conversely, and I would kind of do the takeaway, the reason I don't need him in there the whole time is that he doesn't care about, Jenny's computer. He doesn't care about, how the bookkeeper is going to, access your bank accounts. Like there's things he doesn't care about. So we don't need him in there for that. But the risk conversation where like we're talking about his baby, the thing that he, blood, sweat, and tears 25 years ago, he's got to be there for that. And that, so hopefully that makes the sale with the stakeholder or the influencer. Now, when you get the CEO in the room, it's less about, there are going to be some questions, but it's really a recap. Hey, I was talking to Andrea. She was a little bit surprised that there's some gaps in your security protections. And some of those gaps could cause a data leak. It could cause you to lose some of your intellectual property and let the bad guys, the hackers, see your plans, how to create your widget, your secret recipe for fried chicken, like whatever is important to that person. So during that 10 or 15 minutes, you're recapping, and what you're doing is you're showing the impact of doing nothing, because you need the CEO to buy in that, those are pretty big risks. And so you will talk about things that the CEO cares about: his reputation, the company's reputation, the growth strategy, their perhaps how would it impact that company if their top 3 clients left them? The 3 clients that have been with him for 30 years, they're gone because they can't do business with a company that had a breach. And so that's what you're doing, is you're proving the impact using the things that a CEO cares about.
Absolutely.
And then you're like, great, you care. I'll just deal with Andrea over here, and we'll worry about the numbers, and we'll worry about the contracts. That's all we needed you for. Go back to doing what you do best. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, exactly. And you're taking away that I need to check with somebody else objection at the same time too. So it's a 2-for-1. So
yes, it is, which is fun.
And it does take practice for that. I did find that, like, the first time I did it, I think I would just tell people, look, in 10 years of doing IT sales and meeting with companies, I always find that there's always one question I forgot to ask. I want to make sure that I cover that with the CEO. I want to get all of those questions that he might have. And I have found, every single time there's one question that I have forgotten to ask.
Yes.
So I just want him in there for 5 minutes just to make sure.
Yeah, and I like to use the phrase something like I don't leave things out on purpose. I just don't know what questions he's going to have. And so I want to be able to answer those questions.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, perfect. So I know we're going to have to land this plane soon, but just answer some of the user questions. So going back to our previous one, selling into a new prospect for MSSP services.
Yeah,
How would we do it?
I would still do the risk-based selling matrix, which is if you picture like a grid or a Gartner Magic Quadrant of 4, draw a plus sign on a piece of paper. And the 2 axes are likelihood that something happens and impact on the organization. Likelihood is very logical, and I would lead with that. I would get them to agree that, like, okay, in theory it could happen, but would it really impact me? Well, that's the second half of the grid, is impact. And so you want to be able to prove high likelihood, high impact. And if you need more than that, I do have a 6 or 7 minute training I'm happy to share with anybody. Just email me or connect with me on LinkedIn and ask for it. But I have a whole training around the risk-based selling matrix. And if you have the book Gap Selling by Keenan, he talks about the risk-based selling matrix as well. And it feeds into cybersecurity brilliantly.
Perfect. I'm going to go back through the questions, just make sure I got all the questions. See if we missed any, Andrea. I think we've got all of, I just look back through there. So as I'm looking through that, Jennifer, you speak on, I know you and I go back the three of us go back a decade, so we've seen a lot of sales and marketing tactics in the MSP, MSSP industry for a while. How would we take away that old school mentality? What are some tactics we can do with? Because I think the ways that I would sell MSP services 10 years ago probably don't work now, as they're not as effective as they were.
Yeah, and I think part of that is that humans, we evaluate opportunities differently now. We're a little bit more skeptical. Maybe we've been burned. And the rise of AI is brilliant and wonderful in providing a lot of leverage, but it's going to change and already is changing the way that people buy because of that level of skepticism. So the biggest thing, this is a very broad brushstroke, but the biggest thing is to sell with humanity, to sell leaning into relationships. Like, we are all relational people. You let in saying something about sleazy sales or slimy sales. Like, nobody likes the sleazy, slimy salesperson, but that's because we want to have at least some level of professionalism or relationship with the people that we're doing business with. And so that's what works is it's, the golden rule: treat people the way that you want to be treated. And so that, I know that, again, very, very broad brushstroke, but as you're working through your marketing, as you're working through your sales, ask yourself, like, if a salesperson was doing this to me, like, let's just pick cold prospecting on LinkedIn. Like, we all hate it. So if we all hate cold prospecting on LinkedIn, please don't use cold prospecting on LinkedIn to sell managed services, managed security. If you happen to love that and you're like, yay, a cold message, then by all means do that, because somehow you're able to pull it off with, genuine care and concern. Most of us hate that. So don't do that in your marketing, because you're not going to like it, because you don't like when somebody does it to you. Same thing with sales. Like, you don't like when someone argues with you. You don't like when someone talks over you. You don't like when someone monologues. So don't do those things in your sales process. It just makes you a not so good human to do those things. So embrace that humanity and just be a good human. I feel like that should be like rule number one that we all teach our toddlers. Just be a good human.
Exactly. Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing all kinds of wonderful things. I learned a few things today myself. How would our viewers and those that might be watching this on the replay, how would they get more help from you for the sales process?
Yeah, so for those of you that are in the tech tribe, we have a tribal perk, and so you can search for me on the tech tribe. And then if you're not inside of that community, I'm just going to give the URL and let people get the tribal perk, even if they're not a tech tribe member, although they should be. I feel like it's the easiest decision for any MSP from startup to $20 million in revenue. Like, it's such an amazing value. But if you go to mspsalesrevolution.com/tech-tribe-perk, so tech tribe perk, you'll get all kinds of information there on what I do, which is really provide a framework and a system for sales and marketing. And then we've bundled a couple of extras in there just because we love the tech tribe.
Perfect. And I know, too, I also want to plug your in-person event that's coming up in Dallas. For those of you, she runs the Ultimate Growth Conference. Is this your third year doing this, or second?
Three. Yeah.
That's why I thought it was the third. So May 6th through the 8th in Dallas. Tell us a little bit more about what's coming up for that.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we are unpacking this. I'm going to get excited, so I'll try to keep it short, but we are unpacking the sales systems and the marketing systems and the operational frameworks that are needed to get you to that 7-figure level. So a lot of people are looking for, 5 million or greater. And that's really what we're going to unpack. So we've got some statistics and some systems that we're going to show you inside of those days. And right now we have, I believe, 9 or 10 early bird tickets left. So if you want to grab one, go to mspsalesrevolution.com/ultimate, because it really is the ultimate IT growth conference. We keep it small. There's 200 to 250 people in the room. We've got a workbook. There's workshop components. So you're learning, but you're also doing, because the last thing you need is like another notebook full of notes that you don't do anything with. And so you don't do that at my event. You actually execute and get stuff done.
Excellent. Jennifer, thank you again so much. I know, we're just so privileged to have you here with us, especially to kick off our first Behind the Geeks of this
Yes.
year. We're very appreciative of your time. When we know, I think you said before in the pre-show that you got to catch a plane right now too. So
I do. I've got about 20 minutes till I need to call my Uber. So I got a little buffer, very, very little. So I appreciate you guys making time for me and fitting this in my calendar.
awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. We appreciate it. Safe travels, by the way, too.
Thank you.
Appreciate having
Thank you,
today.
Jennifer.
So thank you all again for attending this session. If you found value from this, those of you who are tuning in live, please put that in the comments for us. If there's things that you would like us to do, maybe somebody you would like us to interview on a future Behind the Geeks episode, let us know in the comments. But we appreciate all of those of you who tuned in live for this session. Konstantinos, I think he's the one tuning in from Greece, said thank you. I love this session. PRG said cheers. So we appreciate that. ClearCom, thanks for the great session. And then, like I said, as soon as we hit the off button, you'll be able to go back and watch this stream on YouTube as well. So you won't have to wait for the upload. Bethany Jones, thank you for tuning in live. Make sure I get all of these in there. Thomas Fox, appreciate you having you on the show as well. Tyler Hammond. Lee Wood was on here as well. So again, excellent stuff here. So any other parting advice that you could give to MSPs about sales, Andrea, as the head of member success for the Tech Tribe?
Oh gosh, I think definitely go check out Jennifer's Tribal Perk, and I think she's got some free resources out there as well that you folks should download and check out. Sounds like she has a really good process, so absolutely check those out.
Yeah, and I think she also has a course inside the Tech Tribe
She does,
as well.
definitely, yeah. So I mean, no reason not to go and check that out. If you're a member of the Tech Tribe, it's in there for you. So absolutely.
Yeah, so there's no excuses. No excuses,
Nope.
just results. That's what we're all about, helping you folks with this year, is getting you the results, bringing you the thought leaders in the MSP market. So we've got a lot to look forward to. I think we've got the next 5 months planned out with guest speakers, don't we? I think we're all the way to the end of May now. So, but again, thank you so much, Andrew, for being on with me today. We appreciate all of the Tech Tribers, and those of you who aren't Tech Tribers, link in the description, join the Tech Tribe. You won't regret it, I promise. I wish I would have had the Tech Tribe 10 years ago when I was running my MSP. Tremendous value. So Tiffany Bell, thank you. Appreciate having you on here as well. And that is going to end it for Andrea and I. It is afternoon coffee time for me. The 3 p.m.
100%.
coffee rush.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks everybody, and thank you, Andrew.
All right. We'll see y'all on the next one. And like I said, let us know in the comments if you appreciated this, if you're watching this on the replay. Thank you very much. Be safe. We'll see you soon.
Everyone.